Good evening. To some of you, welcome back. Some of you may not have watched us last week, but the good people at Fox and Friends, that famous show that the president watches in his bathrobe, hopefully belted, they didn't miss us.
Well, most people would want to go back to work. They want to make a paycheck. AOC is urging a work boycott. Listen to this.
When we, have this discussion about going back or reopening, I think a lot of people should just say, no, we're not going back to that.
Tonight, consider the egg roll. A food that represents that marvelous American quality of reinvention. Spring rolls and summer rolls can be found in restaurants and on street corners across Asia. But the giant, deep-fried, cabbage-stuffed egg roll, like jazz music and salsa music and Taylor Swift, is a thing that owes a cultural debt to other places, but could only have come together here in this country. In the first half of the 20th century, two small businesses in New York City claimed credit for inventing the egg roll: Lung Fong's and Port Arthur. And nearly a century later, Nikita Randall, 36-year-old Chicago native, graduate of the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, the Keller Graduate School of Management, and proprietor of the Twisted Egg Roll, decided to build on their invention with, well, a twist. Catering large events out of a shared kitchen in Chicago's Hyde Park, home to that other only-in-America creation, Barack Obama. She catered large events with buffalo chicken egg rolls, mac and cheese egg rolls, southwestern egg rolls, and fajita egg rolls. After 5 years of struggle, business was booming. Last February was her most successful month yet, making the Twisted Egg Roll one of the 30 million small businesses that embody the creativity and ingenuity and can-do of American enterprise. Then came the virus. Since most of Randall's business came from catering events, as those events began to be canceled, her operations and her revenues ground to a halt. This plague has been devastating for small business owners like her. Luckily, Republicans and Democrats alike love to fight over who loves small business more. No, it's me. No, it's me. So of course, Randall was going to be protected, right? For a brief moment, it seemed like she might. Congress, awakened by the crisis from its long cubicle nap of inaction, created the $350 billion Paycheck Protection Program.
We're asking small business owners across America to place their faith in us.
As one might deduce from its name, the Paycheck Protection Program, or PPP, the purpose of it was to keep people employed at small businesses specifically. Only firms with 500 employees or fewer were eligible. They could apply for a loan equal to 2.5 times their monthly payroll costs, up to a cap of $10 million. If at least 75% of that loan went to payroll costs, it would be forgiven by the government. To break this down a bit, in other words, many of you, as taxpayers, were giving small businesses money in exchange for those businesses continuing to employ you. Nikita Randall applied for one of those loans in the modest amount of $7,500, about 3,000 egg rolls worth. On the very same day the application period opened, April 3rd. Responsible woman. Then, after a nearly 3-week wait, Randall received a message that her application hadn't even been processed, despite the fact that she'd applied on day one. That same day, the bank posted on the company website that funding for the PPP had run out. There was none left for her. And the story of where that money went instead? Well, it's twisted, and it also involves food. Like the egg roll, a 22-ounce bone-in ribeye drowning in a river of butter, served with a sweet potato casserole with a savory pecan crust on the side, is a meal that could be invented only in America. Only in America is its story even possible. In 1965, Ruth was in a similar position to Nikita Randall. A divorced mother of 2 in New Orleans, she mortgaged her house to purchase a 60-seat restaurant that had failed and changed hands half a dozen times in 38 years. Like Randall, Fertel poured her heart into her business. She hired single moms like herself. Then she had her own disaster. In 1976, a fire burned down her restaurant. Luckily, she had recently acquired a second venue as a party space, and she moved her restaurant there. Because of a quirky agreement with the previous owner of the restaurant she'd bought, Chris Steakhouse, she couldn't use that name at any other address. So, thus was born the worst and most confusing name in the history of beef, Ruth's Chris Steakhouse. In 1977, Fertel's small business took an important step away from being a small business. It created a franchise. One franchise became dozens. By the turn of this century, the company was grossing $200 million a year and operating everywhere. Now, I am no big business booster, but as the host of this show, I for one am reassured every time I hear a story of a confusing name beating the odds. But if we can agree on one thing, it is that Ruth's Chris is not a small business. It's a former small business. With more than 5,000 employees, Ruth's Chris last year generated $441 million in revenues and held $86 million in cash reserves. In 2018, Ruth's Chris's CEO and president, Cheryl Henry's total compensation package, including salary and stock awards, was more than $6.1 million. And if you're wondering why Nikita Randall's small business didn't get that Paycheck protection money, the answer is former small businesses like Ruth's Chris got that money instead. It applied for and secured a loan in the amount of $20 million.
2 out of 3 loans in New York were ignored by the mom and pops, the small businesses, the restaurants and the barber shops, the hardware stores, the butchers, and small startups, both service and manufacturing. They couldn't get in.
How did a big business like Ruth's Chris get $20 million in coveted small business loans? First, it took advantage of a glaring loophole in the bailout that allowed restaurants and other chains with fewer than 500 employees per location to qualify as small businesses. Second, Ruth's Hospitality Group, the restaurant's parent company, not only dipped its big business claws into the small business pot, but it double dipped, using 2 corporate subsidiaries, a common tactic when big companies need to seem small. This extremely dubious definition of small was advanced by Republicans in Congress, and even Democrats, led by House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Senator Chuck Schumer, the minority leader, went along with it in the end.
Let us pray.
Now, I hear what you might be thinking. Okay, maybe it's not a small business and it took small business money. Okay, maybe, it double dipped. Shouldn't do that with salsa or with corporate subsidiaries, but at least the loans were saving jobs, right?
This will deliver urgently needed relief to our nation's families, workers, and businesses. And that's what this is all about.
Actually, it doesn't appear that very many Ruth's Chris paychecks are being protected by this Paycheck protection loan. The company is refusing to say how many of its 5,000 plus employees have been furloughed or laid off, allowing only that it is a significant number. But according to furloughed staff who've been interviewed, it's pretty much everyone except management. And Ruth's Chris is not the only bad actor, by far. More than 100 not small, publicly traded companies gobbled up $500 million from the PPP.
I'm Nikita Randall, the owner of Twisted Egg Roll, and I have invited you into my home in my lovely kitchen here in Chicago, Illinois.
Nikita Randall applied for $7,500 and was rejected, even as 44% of the total money, $152 billion worth, went to loans of more than $1 million a pop. When Nikita Randall applied for small business salvation, whether she realized it or not, she was up against forces that imperil small business every day. Big business eating up everyone else's share, and legislators too corrupt or spineless to defend the little guy. In American politics, one of the defining battle lines is big government versus business. But as this tale of 2 businesses illustrates, the biggest enemy of small business in America is often big business. The most significant difference between the Twisted Egg Roll and Ruth's Chris isn't scale, it's the power that scale will buy you, despite not being small and not keeping people employed. In the name of small business, these hulking corporations that actually suffocate small business have over the years secured laissez-faire treatment to justify tax cuts and tax loopholes, to free themselves from antitrust scrutiny, to liberate themselves from any duty to pay their workers well or take responsibility for their security. Together with legislators, big businesses have managed not just to deny small businesses like the Twisted Egg Roll the bailout money they need. They've co-opted the very idea of small business, which politicians like to extol as the heart and soul of America, while in fact using this rhetoric as the engine of wealth redistribution upwards to the most powerful businesses who need it the least. As it happens, after a whole lot of media coverage and public reprobation, Ruth's Chris ended up declaring that it would give the $20 million back. How nice. Shame sometimes works. But as a culture, we try to accomplish way too much through shame. Social media mob-imposed remorse isn't a strategy. Big corporations have much of the power in America, but in this crisis, they are desperate. It's a good time to attach some strings. In a moment when they are weak and needy, and when we, the people, the taxpayers, have the thing they need, cash money, we might consider mustering the courage to demand the kind of corporations we would like to buy from and work for. And if they don't want our cash, no problem. Let's wish them luck on the free market they so love.